Today in our series Bigger Than, where we are looking at our worldview, which is a very interesting idea in and of itself. It's like taking out a lens to look at the lens. We're going to be talking about how God is bigger than our worldview. So we're going to talk about a guy named King Nebuchadnezzar and three other men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You probably remember the story of the fiery furnace if you've been to Sunday school, but if you haven't, it's no big deal. King Nebuchadnezzar made a law that everyone had to worship his idol, the statue that he made. Well, three men worshiped God and knew they could not worship idols. They couldn't break God's law in that way. So they stood up to King Nebuchadnezzar, and for it they ended up getting thrown in a fiery furnace. However, when they were thrown in the fiery furnace, they did not die. They did not burn up. Rather, their true protector was revealed. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see four men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the fourth looks like a god." You see, these three Jewish men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, worshiped the true and living God. He was always with them. He was their protector. And when this earthly king threw them into the fire didn't kill them, but rather revealed who their protector was. And let that be a lesson to us about how governments work. God established governments. That's a good thing. That's a healthy thing. Government has a purpose. We'll talk about that in just a second. But when government corrupts or twists its purpose and comes against us, we need to continue to be followers of God and not dependent upon earthly governments. You see, these three men in our story today were free. They were free from any of the fears that government could use to control them because they worshiped the one true God, the one God who's in charge of everything. And in our story, King Nebuchadnezzar learns a valuable lesson, and that's that God's actually in charge and not earthly kings. So let's begin by recognizing the fact that God established the roles for government, family, and even the church. See, government has a job. That job is to protect. It's to provide justice. It's to create or protect a space so that the right thing can be done. Righteousness can be lived out. If government doesn't accomplish those tasks, then people are going to have a hard time obeying God, living righteously, and even being kind to one another. Chaos is going to rule if government doesn't do that job. Paul told us to pray about this very thing. He said in Timothy, "I urge you, first of all, to pray for all people. Ask God to help them, intercede on their behalf, and give thanks for them. Pray this way for kings and all who are in authority, so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives, marked by godliness and dignity." You see, it's God who's established what's right and what's wrong. And God gave governments authority to protect and help people understand what's right and what's wrong. When we get those things turned around and government gets corrupted, chaos ensues. That's what was happening in King Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom in Babylon, and that's why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego ended up suffering. God established government, and as we read the Bible, we encounter a number of stories, a number of people who worked very hard to make sure their government was as healthy as possible. The entire book of Daniel, or the book of Daniel, has a number of stories where that Daniel and his friends had to stand up for what was right in the face of government. They had to submit to government, but at the same time confront it. Joseph worked in government and saved his nation through it. Nehemiah worked in government, and he was able to restore his people back to their homeland. So there is purpose and basis for Christians being involved in government and in politics. As uncomfortable as that may make you sound, God actually intends for us to do everything we can to make our government as healthy as possible. We do that best when we realize that we are citizens of a new kingdom. If you look at the lives of Daniel and his friends, the three men that we talk about today, you find out that they were way more than just law-abiding citizens. They were good citizens. They were leaders in government. They helped establish Babylon. They did everything they could to carry it along, to improve it, to make it a better place to live. They were deeply invested in government, and that's an important lesson to us. But why? Why were they so deeply invested in government? Was it because they had no choice? Or was it because they were God followers anyway, and they realized that God's in charge of the world and that earthly governments should line up under the authority of God? And so as God followers, for them, it was a responsible and righteous thing to make sure that government lined up under God. They did everything they could to in a sense, sanctify their own government. We need to embrace that same kind of thinking. In fact, that's our main worldview concept today. God is king, and we are citizens in his kingdom. We need to help government along, serve in government, support government when we can, and confront government when necessary, because we are citizens of a new kingdom, of a kingdom that's going to take over the world ultimately. And as citizens of that kingdom, we want to help people encounter our king, get to know our king. You see, because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were God followers, it made them amazing citizens. And it's the same way for us as Christians. We should also be motivated to help our own governments, to protect people, to protect the law and order, to establish places where righteousness can take root. When we do that, we make our government healthy. When we make our government healthy, we create a place with freedom and safety for all. We should do that because we are citizens of a new kingdom and because it's the right thing to do. And we're also accountable to God. We should never forget that. God's king, we're citizens in his kingdom, therefore we're accountable to him. We live under the laws of a new kingdom, laws of love, where we love God and others and strive to connect them with their king, their true king, Jesus Christ. We live under the laws of faith, which may sound like it's not a law, but it is. We live by faith and not by sight, Paul once said. And so we need to keep that in mind, that God can be trusted. God has the dial of history before him. He knows how things are going to work, so we can trust him. And we should also remember that we're here to overcome evil with goodness. And I think we get that wrong a lot. I think sometimes we think our job is to complain about evil and hope it goes away. But that's not what we're here to do. Our job is to overcome evil with good. We need to find good, righteous things that we can promote and advance that are going to overcome evil. We need to remember the laws of the kingdom that we're actually a part of. Always being connected to the reality that we're not actually from here. As Christians, our citizenship and our birthright has been moved to heaven, and we're not staying here. We're like on a camping trip. One day Jesus is coming back, and we get to go home. For this world is not our permanent home. We're looking forward to a home yet to come. So yeah, we need to live by the laws of the new kingdom, not just the low laws of our own. And we also need to live by the power of the new kingdom. Jesus should be our example. He walked on this earth. He loved people. He lived powerfully. He changed lives. And that should be our goal. We should seek the presence of God so mightily in us that we can also change the world, and we can bring more goodness to bear in our world and overcome evil with real goodness and real power. And we should never forget that we are here to walk with God while we're here, to walk with Jesus. Why do I say that? Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego clearly walked with God and trusted God. When they were thrown into the flames just revealed that God was there with them and burned away their bondage. We should remember that as well. While we're here on earth, we should stand for what's right. Sometimes we'll need to confront our government, and we may suffer for it, as the men today in our story did. However, suffering, the flames of suffering, only reveal the one we really walk with, which in our case should be, must be, and I pray that it is, Jesus Christ. Yes, government has a role, a very important role. And it's not our job just to complain about it. We may need to confront it. We may need to stand up to it. We definitely need to present some good alternatives to all the evil that's out there. But we certainly should not disengage just because it's difficult. We are Christians. We have the power. God's on our side. He's walking with us, and He's never going to abandon us. So yes, God's bigger than our government. God is king, and we are citizens in His kingdom.